All right, it is Sunday evening and it is time for another recording. This week we are talking about the true nature of grimoires. The first time I heard this word, it was spoken by a British author, so I started pronouncing it grimoire because British people tend not to pronounce their R's. I guess the Americanized pronunciation is grimoire. All right, so what is a grimoire? First, we should start with a question. Do you do magic, or does magic do you? And what I'd like to propose is that a magician's personal grimoire is a means of gaining control of magic and keeping the magic from controlling him or her. Okay. And we're going to revisit this question later. So many people will say, well, the grimoires are mainly advanced magical textbooks. Grimoires are multiple things, but I do have to say, as I've said before, that Western magic in Europe pretty much is a debased form of magic that appears to come from some kind of authentic tradition in the past, but it got corrupted over time. And so the various techniques of magic were leaked into a non-initiated public, more or less, and then taken and sold, reworked, packaged, sold, and proliferated through the clerical underworld of the medieval times. And the original nature of the magic, it still exists pretty much unadulterated in some of the Eastern traditions like Tantric Shaivism and Tibetan Buddhism. But even in those traditions, it has become somewhat debased and corrupted, along various lineages. And so you're lucky if you find, a teacher who has a legitimate attainment in the tradition, much less in the Western tradition. And what I have to say is that the Golden Dawn system of magic, the way that I learned it, was essentially, or is essentially, a restoration of magic to its proper form, a system of initiation, or a system that presents a means of achieving enlightenment in a single lifetime. It's essentially a Tantra of the West. And what you'll find is that the magic of the West bears many resemblances to Tantric Shaivism and Tibetan Tantric Buddhism. And I wonder if they sort of arose from the same practices, maybe in some kind of, mother tongue of magic somewhere. I don't know. But the principles of the achievement of enlightenment are universal, because they're based on how the human nervous system works, how the human nervous system deceives us into entering a world of suffering, or it deceives us into identifying with this sort of outward world of physicality, supposed physicality. Anyway, so I wouldn't say that the grimoires are advanced. I would say they tend to be more individualized. So you might see that some magician in the distant past created for himself or herself a book of spirits, and how he is to conjure them. So you might imagine he might get in contact with a particular spirit, and then the spirit would say, "Oh, hello, you've happened across me. If you would like to talk to me again, this is my name, and here's the sigil by which you can call me up to a visual appearance again, to call me forth." Okay, and then the magician would write down the name and draw the sigil, so that he could conjure that spirit again. And that spirit supposedly gave the magician various powers through its friendship. Now that friendship, to become friends with a spirit is simply to become familiar with it. So you get on familiar terms with the spirit, and it therefore becomes one of your familiars, or one of your familiar spirits. So you begin to see where magic comes from. It comes from this sort of spirit work. What you might find surprising is that a flat-out system of just meditation kind of accomplishes the same thing as the magician who draws a magic circle and conjures spirits to appear outside of it and inside of it. So we'll talk about that in a bit, okay? So is a grimoire a more advanced system of magic that you should only read later on? No, it's more of a system of magic that was originally individualized. It was really only for the magician himself, to keep as a record for himself, for conjuring up various spirits. When you meet a spirit, the name it gives you and the sigil it gives you would very likely be different from a sigil or a name it gives me. It doesn't mean that you and I can't contact the same spirit. We most certainly can, but you have to get to know what a spirit actually is before we start to talk about whether, you and I can contact the same spirit. We most certainly can, but we'll get to what a spirit actually is, okay? So is it advanced? No, not really. But once you get to an advanced level, you will very likely create a book of spirits for yourself. Okay, or at least maybe keep a system of, I don't know, index cards or something like that. So is a grimoire a book of spells? Not really. As you probably already know, ceremonial magicians don't cast spells. Wiccans supposedly do. But if you think about what a spell really means, if I call upon a spirit, I use its name. So I sound out its name. I spell out its name. And a lot of times these words of power are like, made of Hebrew letters or just a bunch of consonants. And you sort of lay out the consonants in front of you and you spell them out or say them, especially in the Enochian system. A bunch of just garbled letters stacked together, and you create a word out of them. And so you're kind of spelling out the name of the demon or the spirit, and it supposedly will appear. So, and then somehow out of that comes the idea of casting a spell. Well, to spell out the name of a demon is really what you're doing. And really, it's the name, yes, which helps to conjure forth a spirit that you've met before. But I would say it's the imagery, it's the image that's more powerful. Book of Spells. Here's another wizard or another. This is my Diablo 4 sorcerer. Okay, rather frightening looking, I might say. But Diablo 4 is kind of a scary game. And if anybody wants to join me on Diablo 4, that is my profile number. You can friend me on Diablo 4 and maybe we can play a game together. The Wiccans, or the folk witches, have the tradition of the Book of Shadows. And I have to say that many witches have a better idea of what a grimoire should be, I think. Basically a book of shadows or book of images. Okay, and the Wiccans have the idea of shadow work, which many ceremonial magicians also have, which I would really like it if more ceremonial magicians had the idea of shadow work. That basically comes from something that Carl Jung put forth when you call forth the troublesome aspects of your own psyche, supposedly, the things that are troubling you, so that you can call them up to make peace with them, because that's essentially a demon summoning. Okay, and so I guess, sorry, ceremonial magicians, but the witches have kind of a better take on this. At least when they have the Book of Shadows is basically a book of troublesome spirits that they are calling up to make peace with them, and to draw power from them. Okay, and so we'll get to what they actually are. What is a spirit? In the Golden Dawn, in the neophyte initiation ceremony, I believe it's the hegemon that says, by names and images are all powers awakened and reawakened. This is the key to magical work, particularly in regard to demon summoning or angel summoning. There isn't much difference, by the way. Okay. At least not at first. So there comes this idea of the imp. Now, an imp is supposedly a little demon. So what I'd like to propose is that any demon or spirit that you conjure outside your magical circle is going to be an imp. And the reason for that is because the word imp comes from a agricultural word, an old agricultural word. This is from Old English. An imp, or an impe. An imp was basically a daughter plant that arose from a mother plant. Okay, so in other words, there's a big demon who basically manifests itself outside its own circle as a little demon, a little imp. Okay, and supposedly, so the imp is like a little offshoot of some kind of master demon. Okay, or you might say Satan himself is the master demon, and he spawns all these imps, something like that, right? Well, so when you work with archangels and angels and elemental spirits and demons, are they merely psychological complexes, or do they actually exist objectively out there in the world? That question itself basically displays a lack of initiation. And I get that question quite a lot in response to the videos, okay? So I think I've answered it already in the discussions. The question itself, is a demon just inside your head, or is it really out there in the world? This either-or scenario is a false dilemma, and that results from the wound of Amfortas. The wound of Amfortas is a mythical wound that the Fisher King receives. Essentially, what the wound of Amfortas is a separation of the person or the king from the land. So the separation of the ego from the rest of the universe is the wound of Amfortas. And that's basically just the split between mind and body. So this belief that you are this mind inside your body, and there's a big bad world out there, this is what's creating the necessity for you to ask that question. Is the demon just inside my own head, inside my little psyche, or is it out there in the world out there? Okay. Now, in order to heal the wound of Amfortas, it's rather simple. The king must be reunited to the land. Okay, and so, like in many of the old traditions, supposedly, the king would be sacrificed. The king is dead. Long live the king. The king would be sacrificed. Well, ritually, yeah. So he would die, but that basically means just being reabsorbed back into the land or into the goddess. So what the king had to do was his ego had to die, and he had to acknowledge that he was merely an extension of the land. Okay, so he was or an extension of the goddess. Why do I bring this up? Well, it's very important to acknowledge that the question about the reality of demons comes from this duality of mind versus body, or me versus the universe. Okay, in order to fix that problem of I'm this little person inside here, and there's a big bad universe out there. Simply adopt the romantic worldview, and the romantic worldview is that essentially that the imagination is not inside you. You are inside the imagination. So this body that you supposedly have, that you think you are, is actually being imagined by something, by the mind of the universe. And so you alongside it, or within it, or around it, are also imagining yourself possibly operating inside it or within it. But you aren't limited to that. And so when you have personal demons, let's say you were abused as a child or something like that, yeah, those are kind of personal. They come from your personal history, okay? But they also resonate with much deeper forms of trauma shared by everyone all around you. Okay, and so not only do we have our own personal demons which sort of hover near us or supposedly within you, but there are also demons all throughout the magical universe that not only are you traumatized, but the entire universe has been exploded in the Big Bang, supposedly. The whole place is traumatized, and there are demons everywhere. Okay. So yeah, you deal with some personalistic demons, but those demons, even though they seem personal to you, they actually resonate and are connected to deeper scars or deeper traumas borne by the entire human race, borne by all of the mammals, borne by all of the animals, all of the life forms on the planet itself, and of course the greater universe, which also appears to be alive, at least in potential. Okay, I don't know if I'm answering that question or not. Are they inside you or are they out there? Yes, both are true. Can we both contact the same spirit? Yes, sort of. And if you're working with, spirits and things like that, they will affect the circumstances of your life, and yes, the people around you, of course. Yeah, and of course, I think people who have the same types of looming spirits will attract others who have the same. Kind of works that way. And so this idea that, like in this little picture here, the shadow is being originated entirely from the mind of the kid? Well, no. But in order for demons to arise, they do need a little bit of help from your own sort of personal imagination, your brain consciousness. So yeah, you do some initial work to give them a form. It's almost like there's this spiritual force out there that says, well, I'm really kind of vague and I exist as potential, but sometimes I arise in your behaviors and in other forms as well. What I'd really like for you to do is give me some kind of form by which you can now, converse with me and then maybe come to terms with what I'm trying to do in your life as I screw it up, basically, right? And so it does help to come up with some of your own imagery once you get skilled at that. And then, so the spirit says, aha, so I see you have some skill with magic or with literature or with art, and you have some images that are sort of ready-made that I can sort of adopt and take on. I might assemble several of them to create a form so I can now talk to you and you can talk to me. Okay, so Yes, a magician does learn some of the tricks of magic at first, as far as all kinds of different forms of correspondence, different names of power, different mythologies, different images. And eventually, as he develops his skill with working with the psyche of the universe begins to come forth and pretty much put on these various forms and names so that he can now have this sort of dualistic dialogue going on with it. Okay, now why would he want to have some kind of dualistic dialogue? Duality is not real, right? There's very important reason for that. All right. So is this kid generating his own demon? No, but he's participating in that demon's ability to appear before him. And now some kind of magic can happen, right? Now that he's conjured up. And normally the idea of a magician who conjures a spirit is like, well, you conjure the spirit and interrogate it and derive some secrets from it. And it teaches you secrets of magic. And then you give the spirit license to depart and it goes away, sulking. Okay. Yeah. That's not exactly what happens, but it's pretty close. This comes from one of the articles I wrote in Forbidden Realms. So the guy is sitting here meditating, and as he meditates, some kind of fearful scenario arises as a spirit, like fear of snakes. The things that trouble us in meditation and in our regular lives always involve fearful scenarios or desire scenarios. That's why demons are both frightening and violent and seductive. Both. Fear and desire are what cause humans to suffer. And so spirits take on the forms of fearful imagery or desirous imagery, tempting imagery. And so when you are doing this work with spirits, what eventually dawns on you is that, wait a second, there's always this one spirit in the room that I can't ever seem to quite get a handle on. Okay, so I always seem to be focusing outward on whatever's arising outside my magic circle. But then suddenly at some point you realize that, wait a second, in order to confront this imp on the outside of my magic circle, there's also me who has arisen here inside the magic circle so that this confrontation can happen. And then eventually, and this can come as quite a shock to your system, that you realize that you are a spirit too, or you are a demon yourself that has arisen. Kind of like that thing that appeared outside of your magic circle is a manifestation of trauma, either experienced by you or experienced by the human race, many generations ago, or possibly even experienced by some kind of previous life form. We have many horrific scenarios embedded in our cell memory which can come to the surface when we do magic. And many of these scenarios embedded in our cell memory continue to haunt us. Okay, so let me give an example here. You're driving your car in traffic, and you do something dumb. You cut somebody off. Oops. And that person beeps at you and almost hits you, right? And swerves and almost hits somebody else, something like that. And then you realize, I think that was my fault. Oh my God. But everybody's okay. But for some reason, for several more miles, you can't stop thinking about it. It's like, was I really at fault? The other guy was probably an asshole. He probably did something wrong, right? Or was I at fault? And you keep reliving that scenario over and over. Now, that's not happening deliberately, it's happening compulsively. So what's happening is that scenario is now haunting you. It's basically coming after you saying, hey, excuse me, you need to come to terms with what just happened so that it doesn't trouble you again. So it's not going to happen again. It's like an instinct, okay? So it crops up and says, you need to make peace with this scenario and learn from it. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep bothering you until you do. It's kind of the way the psyche works. Okay, it's the way the nervous system works maybe, but really it's kind of the way the universe works. All right, so, and if you, let's say you pull over to the side of the road, it's a little bit extreme, but you pull over to the side of the road and you process the scenario and you say, you know what, I did screw up there. I did make a mistake back there in traffic. And from now on, I'm going to check that. Not only check the rear view mirror on the right, but also glance over my shoulder, something like that. Okay. And then so the spirit that's haunting you that wanted you to basically say, hey, you need to figure out something for this scenario, says, okay, you've now acknowledged my fear, and I no longer need to possess you and take you over to force you to make peace with me. You've done it. You've deliberately done it yourself. You've made peace with what happened, and you're moving on. And it kind of disintegrates. Of course, that won't be the last you've heard of that particular spirit. Okay. Now, that particular spirit is not just unique to that situation. There are many other times where human beings can screw up, and the same kind of spirit's going to arise again and say, hey, you just did something. You need to address it and move on. Okay. And there are many scenarios like this, not only from this life or this generation, but also from deep in our evolutionary past, where we've screwed something up, made a mistake, and other life forms died, or we died, and the scenario comes after you to get you to learn or confront something. Okay. So it might be a little bit kind of, I don't know, a letdown to describe spirits in that way, but remember that these kinds of screw-ups happen on a cosmic scale too. And there are forces always kind of like tapping each other on the shoulder, trying to reconcile, trying to get other forces to reconcile with them. Okay. And so, yeah, you have all kinds of stuff that you possibly inherited from the past, some traumatic scenarios that you've inherited that you never experienced as a person in this life, in this generation, but they're still there in cell memory and they're haunting you. And you kind of can't let them go or be free of them unless you conjure them up and basically acknowledge what they're trying to show you. I think a really good example is fear of snakes. It astonishes me. I think we're starting to grow out of it now, but it just astonishes me. Like when people come across a snake in the yard, it's like, oh yeah, and we killed it. It's like, what do you mean you killed it? But we found a snake and we killed it. That's what you do, right? It's like, wait, okay. So in other words, a fear demon took you over and forced you to compulsively kill the snake. So if you were to actually confront that demon, you would basically say, you want me to kill this other life form compulsively. Hold on a second. I'm looking at this snake. It's not venomous. Thank you for sharing, but you need to turn up only in places where, or at times when it is appropriate. And it is not appropriate for you to compel me to kill this snake because it's not venomous. And then the spirit goes, oh, right, of course. So now we're learning to basically only go after the venomous ones, okay? And that spirit might even be thankful. It says, oh, thank you. Now, okay, so I'll only crop up when it's venomous. Or every time there's a snake, I'm going to warn you. I'm going to gonna sort of try to take you over, possess you, and get you to kill it. But then you can stay my hand. Now that you know me, you might even give me a name, right? Fear of snakes. You might stop me from taking you over and say, hold on a second. There's no need to compulsively kill a snake here. Okay, and so that spirit becomes more on friendly terms with you, and it won't take you over so much anymore. But the interesting thing is that when there is a venomous snake inside the house, you might very well want to kill it. Okay, because then it's a legitimate threat, at least if it's inside the house, right? All right. All right, so that's, and of course, so when you conjure a spirit like that, you either make friends with it, and it'll keep coming back. It says, "Oh, another snake. Should I give you energy and power so that you can strike at it and kill it, or are you going to send me away because it's not poisonous?" Something like that, right? So it eventually, the spirit of fear that tries to take you over will get weaker and weaker, because you're quite capable of rationally deciding whether you're going to kill the snake or not. You don't need to be compelled to do so in a sort of dumb, stupid way. So eventually that demon won't come back anymore, and it'll be gone. Okay, so what we do with these spirits or demons as they arise is we either dissolve them or we make friends with them. They become familiar spirits. Okay, and when we do that, we can actually make some effort to give them some kind of form and some kind of name so that we can understand them better. And so we can recognize them when they crop up. Because every time one of these urges kind of compulsively tries to take you over, you can't really recognize it. It just happens unless you have a form and a name by which you are capable of objectifying it and recognizing it. All right. Now, the interesting thing is that in order for this sort of dialogue to happen between you and the spirit, there also is this other spirit that arises within you, which is called the ego, which is also compulsive. It's a compulsive vehicle that allows itself to become possessed by the fear demon or the desire demon. All right, and not only do you learn to dissolve the spirits outside your circle, but eventually you realize I can also dissolve the ego spirit inside the magic circle. This is not a spoiler alert. It's still, when you realize in your very bones that the ego itself is a demon that's summoned into existence, it's a shock to your system. It's truly a frightening experience. And it's very much akin to the plot twist that happens in The Sixth Sense. If you've seen that movie, spoiler alert, the main character, played by Bruce Willis, is a psychologist who's helping a kid who can see dead people. And what we don't realize until the end of the film is that Bruce Willis is actually already dead. But when he realizes finally that he's dead and he's been talking to this kid, it's a shock. And that shock that he experiences, I'm already dead, is really the reason it so resonates so strongly with us, and why the movie is such a masterpiece, is because it's the same shock we get when we realize that the persona that we've been compulsively becoming doesn't really exist. It's just a spirit that's being compulsively pushed up into existence. And then the fact that it can just dissolve right here and right now is terrifying. And I'll be dead. I'll die if that happens. Then what? And so, like I said, when the ego dissolves, it's like it feels like you're dying, and all that remains then is the persona. So, in other words, I use the word ego just to describe something unconscious that compulsively arises to confront this or that demon in some kind of dualistic scenario. Okay. When the compulsive ego dies, you can still arise in your personal form, but you do it consciously now. And so there really is no ego anymore. There's just the persona. Okay, and this is once that happens permanently, you're supposedly enlightened. Okay. And what happens, on the way is that you spend less and less time in ego mode, and the ego really begins to dissipate. And there are times when you might be sitting on the couch and there's no ego, and then suddenly you're thirsty. And oh, the thirst demon has come up. Thank you for sharing. And yes, the body is thirsty. So thank you for serving me. I will go get a drink of water or have some tea. And then, of course, once my thirst is sated, I'll thank the spirit for sharing and give it license to depart. Be there peace between me and thee, and be ye ready to come when called. And this is really the way that the adept sort of lives. Might sound strange. And so once you get good at conjuring spirits in this way, you like giving them some kind of objective form so that you can talk to them. You do this so that you can really work through these traumatic scenarios one by one in a sort of controlled fashion. And eventually they'll either dissolve or they'll just get on very friendly terms with you. Okay, and these traumatic scenarios, they take on some kind of personified or animal form or spirit form. They give you energy. First of all, if they dissolve entirely and never bother you again, all the energy that was being pushed out into them, creating that sort of haunting scenario out there, is reabsorbed, becomes yours. It's not being taken up and trapped inside that scenario anymore. It becomes yours, and you're free of it, and you have more energy. Yeah. So the more things that haunt you and chase after you, the more your vitality is drained. Okay, so the more ghosts you have from your past, the more drained your vitality is. They really are vampiric, but basically it's because they're just kind of, your own being is divided into all these separate bits that are all at war with each other, trying to make peace. Okay, and one by one, you dissolve those. They or get on friendly terms with them. Okay. And when you're on friendly terms with the spirit, it will give you its power to do various things in various scenarios. Okay. And so look at some of these names. These come from various grimoires. I have various grimoires here. This is the Key of Solomon, as published by MacGregor Mathers. The Grimoire of Armadale. These are all like Renaissance and medieval grimoires. The Arbatel of Magic, which has the Olympic planetary spirits in it, which is pretty cool. It's got these sigils. So we're going to talk about sigils in a bit. Oops. There. Various sigils for conjuring these planetary spirits, apparently. This is the version of the Goetia, which many people ask me about. Now, the Goetia and the Lesser Key of Solomon, they pretty much arose from the corrupted form of the grimoires from the past. So they even arose from various catalogs of demons that were comprised to debunk magic or to criticize magic, and the various spirits and demons taken from those catalogs of demons. They were taken from sources that were compiled to sort of make fun of magic. But it doesn't matter because these are culturally derived names. They kind of have a bit of history to them. What you'll notice here is that the names of these various demons here, they come from various grimoires, okay? Golmari. So if you were to conjure a spirit, something appears to you, and you ask it to tell it its name, it might tell you, something might come up, okay? And if it doesn't, you can kind of give it a name, and that's kind of the same thing. So if you end up giving it a name, it's kind of the same thing as it telling you the name. Okay, you're co-creating with the spirit out there at the same time. Okay, so the funny thing is that if you think you're making all this stuff up, well, where does it come from? Come from you? You don't really exist. It comes from the psyche. So whether it comes from the spirit or from you, it's still going to be meaningful. Okay. But the more skill you develop with magic, the more you allow the psyche of the universe to speak to you without you having to sort of force it and put a name on top of it until it's willing to tell you its name, something like that. All right. Yeah, so the real initiation for somebody doing work with spirits and demons is that you develop the ability that allows the imagination or the psyche of the universe to speak to you. Artists know how to do this. When writers write fiction, sometimes they say, well, I didn't really write it. The main character told me what to say. The main character came, like when Anne Rice finished her Vampire Chronicles, what she claimed is that I didn't really intend to finish them, but then the vampire Lestat came to me and basically wanted me to tell the rest of the story, and so I did. Might even be true. Interesting. And my favorite grimoire, still not really, it's still a debased form of magic, I think, but this is the sacred magic of Abramelin the Mage. Yes, this is the older 6 months version. I know there's a newer version. I'm not too fond of the new version. It's because it tries to get everything correct. There is no correct in magic. Except in terms of initiation. The pattern in this book is very good for the work before you're an adept and then the work after you're an adept. It kind of shows you what you should do once you achieve the knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel, whatever that means. Okay, so once you have you've attained at least the grade of 5 = 6 in the Golden Dawn, this kind of tells you what the next step is. Yeah, but even so, you've got these, towards the end, you have these series of magical squares, which are, spelling out the names of spirits, casting spells, right? That whole system is very fanciful, and I don't know who wrote this. It's kind of like they took a system of magic that they knew had some validity to it. It had already become corrupted over time, and they kind of just, packaged it and say, well, let's make a magic book out of this, and then, I don't know, publish it somewhere. Choronzon, that is a spirit that I have met. That comes from the Enochian system. Supposedly, Aleister Crowley wrestled with Choronzon. Choronzon is essentially the spirit that exists underneath you, ready to devour you. Or the spirit of the abyss, which is ready to devour you. And a lot of these names of spirits come from old pagan deities. Baal, I think, was one from, it's an old Hebrew god when the Hebrews were still pagan. Astaroth, I think it comes from Astarte or something like that. Paimon appears in the movie Hereditary, very one of the most horrifying horror movies I've ever seen. Paimon comes from the Lesser Key of Solomon, I believe, or from the Goetia. Abraxas is an old spirit from Gnostic times. But once again, when you meet a spirit, it might take one of these names, maybe pulled from your studies in magic. It might combine names together. Okay, it's amazing. Or let's say if you have a spirit that represents the fear of drowning, okay, or basically that would be the spirit of mastery over swimming underwater. Okay, in other words, you need to get over your fear of drowning in order to really swim underwater and enjoy the watery environment. That spirit might take some kind of name that sounds like gurgling or something like that, right? Maybe. Or it might sound like water. It might have a water-like sound to you. You never know how these things might pop up in your imagination. And we have the sigils. So when you meet a spirit, supposedly it will tell you its name, or you will give it a name. It's kind of the same thing. And by names and images are all powers awakened and reawakened. So there will be a sigil also that you can use, which was probably more potent. Now, the interesting thing about the sigil is that it's better to think of if there is a traumatic scenario from that's deeply embedded in cell memory, let's say, or it's cosmic, embedded in your cell memory. In order to experience that challenging scenario of fear or desire, you kind of have to reimagine it. Okay, but some of these traumatic scenarios are so deeply embedded from maybe they might come to us all the way back from primordial times when we were single-celled life forms. They could be that old. So they're no longer vivid. They're just kind of abstract. We don't really know what that is, but they're always dualistic. There's always something I'm escaping from. There's always something I'm bothered by, or there's something I want, something I need, something I desire. Like running away from predators, fear, or chasing after food, something I need, right? Or also fear of the environment, like something like, fear of lightning or storms or things like that. So these fears can be so deeply embedded that they are all that remains of them as abstractions. But the outward sigil is going to sort of conjure up that tension that exists between you and it, whatever that is. Okay, so a lot of times, so if you're dealing with a traumatic scenario from this life, like let's say you were traumatized as a child, it might be better just to reimagine that scenario. Okay, but you could also create a sigil that's sort of abstract that conjures up that scenario more succinctly for you, so you don't have to play a whole movie in your head. You can kind of condense that movie into a single sigil that can now conjure up that challenge that you faced at the time. Okay, and so once this is how you would conjure up the spirit of that challenge, so you could then make peace with it and either befriend it or dissolve it. Poof, gone. So a method for conjuring spirits, conjuring demons, is presented by me in an article called Meditation versus Ritual, Magical Evocation Part 2. And this is in the publication Forbidden Realms. And there's a link to that in the description box below the video. In this article, I disclose a technique for conjuring a demon. Okay, I give two versions. I give the hardcore version, which is magic circle and magical spell or magical ritual, and the light version, which is basically done through writing. And so anybody who's doing the Kabbalah magic curriculum really shouldn't be doing any practical magic yet or demon summoning, at least not directly, because the LBRP does tend to prod demons to appear, as we've discussed in an earlier video. You can still do the light version of magical evocation, because essentially when you do work in your magical journal, that's what you're doing. Things that bother you, you label them and you reimagine them, right? You imagine them and you label them. It's like, oh, I think that's an empowerment issue. Oh, why do I feel so weak when that happens? Oh, it's like, and so it's some kind of empowerment spirit that you're dealing with. You can give it. So by names and images are all powers dealt with. And so you kind of come up with a word for it, and the imagery of what happened is you're now beginning to explore how demon magic works as you do your magical journal work. All right, so in the article Meditation versus Ritual, Part 2, I do give a light version, which you could do. And of course, the hardcore version, which involves drawing a magic circle and all that stuff, that's also presented there. And the interesting thing about that is when people conjure demons, there's always this sort of like, wow, you conjure the demon and then you interrogate it and then it gives you secret magical powers, right? But there are 3 questions that you can ask a spirit once it has taken on a form and it has a name. And those questions are, what do you want? What do you truly need? And how will you feel when you get what you truly need? There, that's not so much of an interrogation now, is it? Okay, and then there's more involved with that. So you basically, it will end up then feeding that demon what it needs. And you can see what might happen when you do that, because once it becomes satisfied, it might just go away forever, dissolve, and never bother you again. Yeah, you can do this with a lot of demons, actually. Even the ones that haunt all of humanity. Not only when they dissolve do they give you energy, but you might also just make friends with them, and as they crop up, they kind of materialize again and say, "Oh, you got a situation here. Do you want me to give you my power? In other words, do you want me to possess you and take you over?" And then you can basically use that power if you're on friendly, conscious terms with them. Yeah. It's just not really all that mysterious, because if you think of a kung fu master, they have 4 or 5 different spirit forms that they use to become really powerful as the adepts of kung fu fighting. The tiger, the dragon, the snake, the crane, and I think there's a leopard in there too. There's like 5 of them. I'm sure there are others. But you'll notice that these animal forms are frightening, traumatic spirit animals for the most part. Okay, humans were probably at one point hunted by saber-toothed lions or saber-toothed tigers, so they were quite, and there were also cave bears, which are also, bears are still pretty dangerous, but cave bears must have been really bad. And I think humans thought that they were so awful that they pretty much hunted them to extinction. Yeah, humans have a very strong tendency to kill anything that kills humans. But anyway, these various spirits are basically traumatic scenarios from our evolutionary past that you can make peace with, make friends with, and borrow their power, and to quite stunning effect when it comes to the kung fu arts. Okay. Eventually, as the kung fu master gets older, he dissolves the spirits entirely, and then that's really interesting stuff can happen then, because he can a true kung fu master can defeat someone without fighting at all by simply overpowering that person with presence, humility, compassion. And because all these spirits have now been completely mastered and dissolved. There are other spirits too, other than animal spirits. Spirits of the land, spirits of flood and fire. This is why we conjure the elements, because there's wind storms and fire and flood and avalanches, lightning strikes. These are all traumatic, dangerous forces that we also need to come to terms with, not just animals. So, do you do magic, or does magic do you? Remember that the psyche exists not inside of you. You exist inside the psyche. And most humans run around possessed by the various unresolved traumas that exist out there in the universe, kind of roaming around, waiting to possess you, to get you to either confront them and make peace with them, or just compulsively act them out again. So if you are a typical human, then magic just does you. It simply possesses you and takes you over, makes you yell when you, and then of course afterwards you're like, I can't believe, I don't know what came over me. I'm so sorry. A magician isn't like that. A magician is somebody who has mastered that, who cannot be taken over in many cases anymore by any spirit. All right, well, I hope this helps. Once again, I'm worried about whether I've just made the subject of grimoires fuzzier than it's ever been for some people. And remember, when I describe magic as psychological, yeah, that's fine, because the psyche does not exist inside you. It's not brain consciousness. It's the consciousness of the universe. Okay, so you yourself are being imagined. You are not imagining things. Okay, yes, you can imagine things with your brain consciousness. That kind of imagination is relatively weak, but it's possible for you to participate in that greater imagination where things are much more powerful, much more vivid, much more energetic. Yeah, you can awaken in that realm and then operate in that realm. That is the realm of the superpowered adept. All right, until next time.